Good evening. Tonight I wanted to talk about why the name Piety Hill for this channel. Russell Kirk is one of my, I would say one of the formative authors in my development, in my understanding of culture and politics and literature and things like that. He wrote a book, a biography, really, or kind of like an intellectual biography of T.S. Eliot. That was very influential when I was in my early 20s and got me into reading T.S. Eliot for the first time. He was also a speechwriter for Reagan. I'm sure he did more political work. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But he inherited his ancestral home in Mecosta, Michigan. And it was this spooky old place, seen pictures of it, really tall, kind of like looked like a Foursquare from what I'm remembering, and had the little, I don't know, I even know what you call it, but like that little piece of a fourth floor or whatever that came out the top. But he inherited it, and he talked about how he would see ghosts in that home, and he himself wrote ghost stories, and he called that home Piety Hill. He called it Piety Hill, and the reason that he called it that, what is piety? Piety encompasses. It's not like pietism, which says, "Oh, I'm not going to do anything worldly. I'm going to abstain from cigars. I'm going to just focus on the gospel and just spiritual things. I'm not going to get involved with politics. I'm not going to try to exercise dominion over the world because that's worldly thinking, and I'm going to just be pious, right?" It's not that kind of piety or pietism, but piety itself is a duty that you feel keenly, deeply within your soul to those to whom you have a duty. Okay, so it's your children, your spouse, your father, your mother, your ancestors. It's also to God, to writers that are long dead, those who have influenced Christianity and the West, to have a reverent, it's not that you agree with them on everything, but you have a reverence and respect for them, and you take them seriously, and you do your duty to them. So those duties can differ depending on who we're talking about. If we're talking about your spouse, or your kids, or your ancestors, loving your father, honoring your father, even like in a sense, the patriotic duty that we have to our nation or to our people and our place, the natural affection that is due unto those that are our people in our place. All of those things are wrapped up in that idea of piety. And, all of that then is you have all of these duties and these natural relations and and all of this that you're duty bound to do things, to live a certain way. All of that is subsumed under God. It is oriented by your duty to God Himself. In the Great Divorce, there's one really great example of ordered loves, rightly ordered loves, and how the ordering of this piety that we have should, the duties that we have to fulfill, the affections that we have for our friends and our neighbors and whatnot. It can go wrong, just like any virtue. It can be twisted, and it can become a vice. C.S. Lewis said in The Four Loves that when love, in particular, erotic love, sexual love, when we elevate it to the status of a god within our soul, in the ordering of our affections, it doesn't become a god, but it becomes a demon to us. The same is true of all natural loves. The natural love of a mother to her child, for example, this is good. We all recognize that this is a beautiful thing. Well, there's one lady in the Great Divorce, and her son passed away earlier in her life. And when that happened, So at first, she's accused of this, or this is brought to her attention that this is the idolatry that she has. And it's not the modern way of talking about idolatry of the family or whatever. This was genuine idolatry, where and she said, no, mother love, it's the highest love there is. I'm absolutely right in doing everything that I'm doing. Well, what was she doing? After her son died in an accident, she neglected her duty to her husband. She stopped being his helpmeet. She ignored her other children and stopped doing her duty as a mother toward them. She basically made a shrine of his room and his things and wouldn't let anyone touch them, wouldn't let anyone move them around, and she simply was wrapped up in the grief of mourning the loss of her son. So when you take one duty or one love, one affection, and you let that distort or become distorted so that you're ignoring other duties that you have, that is not piety. That is impiety. A pious woman would have grieved, would have let her husband help her grieve, and would have gotten back to work in doing her duty, her pious duty to others and to God. But she didn't, and she would not accept the bright and happy being, from heaven that came to her. She would not accept any of his reasoning, any of his, encouragements, and all of that exhortation. She wouldn't have it, because she was so wrapped up in the distortion of that one love. So Piety Hill. I like to refer to my home as Piety Hill. I haven't always been absolutely pious. We're human. We're not perfect. But this is a place where we understand our duties to God, to our town, beautiful Pella, Iowa, to our church community, to each other. And these are things that we are constantly working on, because we're not perfect. We're far from it. But we are pious, and in that we are honoring our ancestors, both Dutch and Danish, and the general European heritage that we have. And we want our home to be a place that is pious, and we want to pass that piety on to our children. Now, I mentioned ghosts. This story, so the people that go to the foothills of heaven, they all feel like ghosts, and he always says the big ghost and the ghostly lady and the ghosty people, and he keeps talking about that. And what that reminds us of, tying that in together with Russell Kirk's idea that his own house, Piety Hill, he thought it was haunted by ghosts, and he wrote ghost stories. When it burned down in 1975, he and others said they saw the spirits of ghosts leaving. Now, I'm not saying that's absolutely true. Could be. Maybe it's a wild, Roman Catholic imagination. Maybe it is true. I don't know. That's not the point. The point is, he said that having the sense that he saw the ghosts of his ancestors in the home while he lived there, it made him pious. It made him remember them. He felt like, and so, okay, Russell Kirk said that, I think it was George Santayana said that the physical, material buildings can absorb the emotions that the humans that lived there were experiencing, and it can kind of have this emotional presence that continues. I don't know about that. I do know that there is a holy aroma in a godly home where a husband and wife love each other, and the husband is leading, and the wife is being his helpmeet, and they're working together to raise obedient and pious children. There is an emotion that surrounds that family, that fills that home. And Doug Wilson talks about it like it's an aroma, like there's an incense burning, an incense of holiness, so to speak. Stephen King also looked to George Santayana to talk about, or to bring that into his stories. So you have you have Salem's Lot, where you have this haunted house, the Marston house up on the hill. You have the Overlook Hotel that's also haunted, and other things. He gets weird and he's like a haunted car and all this stuff. But there is something to the fact that if we live as if they were here, that's piety. There's, so great a cloud of witnesses as we run the race. The witnesses aren't people right now. They're not people on Instagram. They're not my amazing, gigantic following here on YouTube or on Facebook or whatever. That's not the cloud of witnesses necessarily. The cloud of witnesses are all the past, the ancestors, your forefathers in the faith, whether they're related to you or not. All of those are the cloud of witnesses, the church triumphant, that are watching. They're around you. They're singing as you sing on Sunday morning. They're joining you in the worship of God when you worship Him rightly. And we need to remember that. We need to live as though our ancestors are here, as if they were ghosts and they could see and they could listen to us talk to our children, listen to us talk to our spouses. We know that the Holy Spirit is there, but sometimes we don't feel like that's enough or something. We just forget it, and we just do whatever we want. But piety is having that sense, that weight, that they're there, and how are you? What would your great grandfather think of you right now? Would he be looking at you, or your great great grandfather, great 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 grandfather? Would he be proud of you, or would he be asking you, "Why are you on your phone so much? Why don't you go and help that neighbor out? Why don't you help this lady at church out? Why don't you go do something? Why don't you work hard? Why don't you, be industrious, start a side hustle, make more so you can provide for your family, and future generations like I did. What are they thinking? How would they look at you if they were present? And so piety is having that sense that they're there, that you have an audience, that God is watching, your ancestors are watching, and thinking about whether you're fulfilling your duty or not. So Piety Hill, why Hill? Well, his house was on a hill. For me, it's actually pretty flat around here, so I'm not on a hill. But like a light on a hill or a beacon on a hill, I want my marriage, my family, my kids when they're adults, and their spouses, and their many kids, and their many kids, and their many kids. I want them as a people, as a nation, to be a city on a hill for the world, for Iowa, for the United States. We'll talk about nationalism later, but when I talk about nationalism or patriarchy, that's really what I have in mind. Each, I have to honor my ancestors and I have that duty to them, but I have to also remember that with each new family, you have a new patriarch. You have a new, what's patriarchy, patriarch, patria, that's father, pater, father. So patria is fatherland. Patriotism is a love for your father's land, quite literally. So, am I, being a patriarch, am I giving my children a land to love? If I'm not, how am I fulfilling, even just the etymological chain of thought there, that makes, patriarchy what it is, that leads to patriotism, leads to a people loving their people. Is my home, this is something that I thought about a lot when I was little, is my home in the future going to be a place where my family wants to be, where my kids, they want to be there? Or are they going to want to be out on the town? Are they going to want to leave my home, leave my family, and go to a foreign land, go to this city? I hope not. I hope to build a nation here. But it starts with me. And it starts with me being pious. And for each one of you men out there who are married and have kids, or are not yet married and are looking for or looking forward to being married and having kids, you are building your own tribe, you're building your own nation, and you will be that patriarch. And so take seriously the matter of duty to your ancestors, to your father, to your family, and to your God. Have a good night.